No, I see it.
Hang on, I've got to find it again. Here we are. Is that okay? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we finished off with the pancreas last time, and I've got about 12 or 15 of screens left here. So, oh, hang on one second. Okay, I had to disconnect my second screen because then I get two screens on the recording. Okay, so here we go. So, well, let's talk about what's left of the ovaries and the testes. So, I think you'll find some interesting things in this area. So, of course, they're very important to the female reproductive system. They are a pair about the size of an almond each, and the eggs are stored. Estrogen is produced, so it's a very busy little organ. And they're held in place on the side of the lower abdomen by many ligaments, quite a few ligaments to hold them in place. Now, the numbers are quite large. So when girls are born, all the eggs they'll ever need are there, about 1 million in each ovary. By the time puberty arrive, over time the eggs just disintegrate, and they're about 200,000. Between 200 and 400,000. I couldn't get an exact number, but it varies, I suppose, with people and nationalities and that sort of thing. And during childbearing years, between 300 and 500 eggs will develop and be released. So if a woman has no kids, that's sort of that's the number. But don't forget, once a woman is pregnant, there's no ovulation for quite a while, even into breastfeeding time. So after menopause, the ovaries will stop producing eggs and they atrophy, they become smaller. Now, due to a loss, so by shrinking, by the atrophy, they stop also producing or reduce producing estrogen, which is very important for the female. So postmenopausal women are often get these symptoms of hot flashes and vaginal dryness, which is due to the lack of estrogen. So this estrogen deficiency can also lead to osteoporosis. That's where the bones lose their calcium and become quite fragile and easily break. So the calcium is very, very important. So just to give you an idea of where the ovaries are, so they're the hips there, and the ovaries are down here. So it's a fairly low level, usually lower than people imagine that they are at. So every month, 10, 12 egg follicles at the beginning of the production of the ovum, these follicles begin to develop. Now, one of them will continue to actually produce a mature egg, and the rest will just be resorbed. Now, I don't know if you know the word resorbed, but it's broken down and becomes part of the body again. It's just absorbed by the body, but it's not an absorption process like in a sponge or filter paper or something like that. It's just a different system. It's called resorption. So they become part of the body again. Nothing's lost there. Now, about 14 days, we get ovulation, where the mature egg is released. And after the ovulation, the empty follicle, now the follicle is where the tiny little bubble, inside the bubble there's liquid, and within the liquid is the egg. The bubble bursts and the egg is released, and moves down the fallopian tube, or the oviduct as it's called now, and then the follicle itself just collapses into itself and starts and what's called the corpus luteum, the yellow body. Notice the yellow. Now, once it's done that, the corpus luteum will start producing progesterone. It's one of the hormones, and a couple of other hormones as well, and for about 14 days. So this is what happens. It's very important, even though it's a tiny little organ. So this is where the follicles are. They're called primordial follicles. These are destined to be the follicles, and they develop, and then one of them grows full of liquid. The egg is released, and then that's the corpus luteum. So from here on, it starts to modify and the egg, it grows and grows and grows, and there's the egg, and most of it just liquid. It then is released. Now this word here, oocyte, it's not oocyte, it's oocyte. The site means a cell. The O, the double O, refers to female, the female aspect of it. So here it's released, the egg's released, the corpus luteum develops, okay, the yellow body, and that's it there. Now, the corpus luteum then becomes a very important set of cells which keep the pregnancy going. Ooh. So the progesterone that's really mentioned before, it helps present, it thickens the lining of the uterus, ready for implantation of the egg, which has been fertilized. If the egg is not fertilized, it doesn't even get there. So the hormonal support that after fertilization, it continues right through pregnancy, and it stops other eggs from maturing. So if fertilization does not occur, fertilization doesn't occur, the progesterone levels just decline, the luteum, the corpus luteum degenerates, disappears. Well, it doesn't disappear, it just becomes small and useless. And then menstruation follows. So we get the lining of the uterus just leaves, and it prepares for the next month. Now, the ovary secretes also the sex hormones of estrogen. That's the ovary, right? So estrogen, and it's also called follicle stimulating hormone, and progesterone. I mentioned progesterone before. And also, this is where people don't know that it also produces some testosterone, which is known as the male sex hormone. And the estrogen and progesterone are the female sex hormone. Now, the estrogen is FSH, is a follicle stimulating hormone, and that actually stimulates the follicle to get the ovum ready, the egg ready. So we have the two, the ovaries respond to this follicle stimulating hormone, and another hormone called luteinizing hormone, and which comes from the pituitary gland. And these two together causes estrogen levels to rise and the group of egg follicles to grow, which is what I mentioned before. So you get a small number, 8, 10 of them, 12 maybe. And as one becomes dominant, the higher the estrogen levels, and it becomes get to maturity, but the estrogen levels will rise and cause the luteinizing hormone from the brain, from the pituitary, to trigger ovulation. So you get these changes in size, in amount of the concentration of these hormones. So as estrogen gets bigger and bigger and bigger in concentration, higher rather, luteinizing hormone is released. Ovulation occurs due to the luteinizing hormone, and then and then the next stage occurs, and waiting for fertilization. Now, the ovaries, they're also a significant, small but significant source of testosterone, especially after menopause. Okay, so another aspect of the endocrine system, the hormones, the female hormones, is milk production. So how is milk production maintained after birth? Now, lactation is the word for milk production. It's maintained by regular removal of milk, so that it has to be released by either mechanical or baby sucking and stimulation of the nipple. So the two together trigger a hormone called prolactin. And that comes from the pituitary also. Now, I don't know if you remember from last time, the pituitary has got two sections, a front one called anterior and the back part, the posterior. And the posterior is also involved and doesn't want to be left out. So it produces oxytocin. And so we have all these hormones raging through a woman. We've got the estrogen, the progesterone, the luteinizing hormone. We've got prolactin and oxytocin now. So in women, this testosterone that's produced, it has an effect on fertility. It has an effect on her sex drive, red blood cell production, muscle mass and fat distribution. Okay, it's like in a male. And most people think that testosterone is a sex hormone, a male sex hormone, but we all need it, and it's important for us. Now, males have more testosterone than females, and as well as the ovaries, we also have the adrenal glands in the female producing testosterone. So it's like a backup, I guess. I don't know why it comes from the adrenal gland as well, but it seems to do that. Make sure maybe the concentration of testosterone is enough. So in women, low testosterone can cause sluggishness. She doesn't feel bright enough to do things, muscle weakness, fatigue, sleep disturbances, reduced sex drive, decreased sexual satisfaction, weight gain, fertility issues, irregular menstrual cycles, vaginal dryness, and loss of bone density. So as you can see, the testosterone in females is very, very important.
May I ask a question, please?
Sure.
With the low testosterone, does it also apply to fatigue in men?
Probably. I don't know. Good question.
Thank you.
Good question. Oh, okay. I hadn't thought of that. I'll do some research. Now, if there are problems with ovaries, could be cancer or some other aspect, or the adrenal glands, and that can also lower the levels of testosterone, which causes problems. So if she has her ovaries removed, of course, that affects it. And if she has adrenal insufficiency, that's another aspect of it. Then the adrenals won't work properly, so there'll be reduced testosterone, and all those possible effects could come in. Did I miss something? Nope. Okay, so with the testes, so again, they're fairly small, but they're certainly bigger than the ovaries. So they're responsible for sperm production and a hormone called testosterone. So here's a summary of it, really. So testosterone, it's an incredibly important hormone in males, and the maturation of the male characteristic. It's like developing muscles, the voice deepening, growth of hair. So it really kicks in around puberty. And these are structures within the testes. The epididymis, it's a very long tube near each testis. And this is where the sperm mature. It takes about 3 months. And it moves the sperm from the testes. It's a sort of a carriageway, if you like. The vas deferens is where it is stored. The sperm is stored for a period of time, and it carries the sperm out of the scrotal sac. And it just sits behind the sac. And the vas deferens between the epididymis and the urethra, and connects the two together. So what happens is the urethra, I'll show you a diagram in a sec, connects the bladder out, and then the vas deferens links into that. So when ejaculation occurs, the epididymis squeezes the sperm out, and out it comes. The seminal vesicles, these also are behind the bladder, and they release a fluid as part of semen. Now, there's a fair bit involved there. So here's a diagram of the various layers of the semen. Here we have these, what are called the seminiferous tubules. That's where they make the semen made, and also the sperm are produced there. I won't go into details, of course. So, and here's all these take have tubes leading to the epididymis, and it takes 3 months of getting into this area to get to this particular area here, and then from here it's ready to be ejaculated. So it's not a fast system. I think I'll move on. Now, the hormones that are involved in the production of the sperm and the male sex hormones are the androgens. The androgen. Andro means male. I've got it on silent. Testosterone has lots of functions. So in the male, growth and development of the male reproductive organs, so the penis grows, the testes grow. There's a major growth spurt during puberty, and so the muscles grow, the bones grow, not only in height but in density and width. Production and maturation of sperm, growth of facial hair, body hair, deepening of the voice, growth of the Adam's apple. Now, the Adam's apple is in the throat, which if it grows, becomes bigger, and that leads to the lowering of the pitch of the voice. Sex drive, libido, now maintenance of bone density. So if a male, as you get older and the amount of testosterone, male or female, decreases, bone density. Now in the female, we mentioned osteoporosis, but because female sex hormones are also involved there. But here, in males, it can also happen. Males get osteoporosis too. And it maintains muscle mass and strength. It does to some degree in females too, but not to the same degree. Fetal development of male reproductive organs. Okay, so here we have an issue. You get an egg being fertilized, and depending on the genetics, it becomes a male or female. So if it's a male, then the amount of testosterone that's produced by this little ball of cells after a while leads to the male reproductive organs, because the origin of the male and the female reproductive organs is identical. But that's another talk. Of course, red blood cells have to increase, and that's done through testosterone as well. So what hormones are produced by the testes? Now, and it's not just testosterone. So we talked about this one, the development and maintenance of being a male. It can be converted into another, a much more active sex hormone called it's dihydrotestosterone, DHT. You may or may not have heard of it. There's another hormone called anti-Müllerian hormone, AMH. And what this does is it's very important for sex differentiation in the unborn baby. So what I said before about testosterone, it works together with the AMH. So you get the sex differentiation becomes male or female. Now, so it produces testes in males, and and it shuts down the development of these Müllerian ducts in females, and that's why it's called the anti-Müllerian hormone. So in the female, these ducts become the fallopian tubes, the uterus and the vagina, but if they're shut down, they become the epididymis, the vas deferens, the seminal vesicles, or part of the testes. So this is right very early on in the development stage. There's another hormone called estradiol, and it's produced in very small amounts in men, and they've got these specialized cells called Leydig cells in the testes. And the amount of estradiol in the blood is similar to those women after menopause. And in men, this estradiol contributes to bone health and maturation of sperm. This is through life, but there are relationships, comparative relationships between males and females right through. There's another hormone called inhibin B. Now, there's another group of cells called Sertoli cells. And now these are in the seminiferous tubules. Now I showed you in the diagram, they're the ones sort of make up the bulk of the testes where the sperm are produced. And they are very important in regulating FSH, follicle stimulating hormones, released from the pituitary. And males, of course, also produce FSH. So all these things are happening and we have absolutely no control over them, and it keeps us going. Amazing. So keeping testes hormone levels in balance. So we've got these hormones, so how do they actually work together? So what testosterone does, it controls the negative feedback loop. Do you remember? You may remember we talked about negative feedback. So if something goes up, feedback goes in and it pushes it back down. So the hypothalamus, now if you remember that we have the pituitary. If you're wondering where the pituitary is in the brain, we talk about it a lot. If you take, say, 2 knitting needles or 2 chopsticks, and if you put, or 2 fingers, put one between the eyes, at the bridge of the nose, and one in the side of the head here, and where they meet would be the pituitary, and it's about the size of a pea. A very important pea. So the hypothalamus is above the pituitary, and it's got a direct link to it. And above the hypothalamus, hypo it means below, there's another section of the brain called the thalamus. One go. So the hypothalamus, it releases a hormone called gonadotrophin releasing hormone, GnRH. Now, gonadotrophin, gonad is like testes and ovaries, they're gonads. Trophin is a hormone that goes to the gonad. So it goes there and it releases a hormone which signals the pituitary to release this luteinizing hormone. Okay, the hypothalamus is above the pituitary, sends a message to the pituitary, now release this hormone, which luteinizing hormone. This luteinizing hormone signals the testes to produce testosterone. Gets quite complex. So then, when this testosterone levels reach a threshold, it gets bigger and higher concentration, and the threshold sends a message to the hypothalamus, less of that. So that's negative feedback. So as this gets more and more testosterone, when it gets to a level, it says, stop, I don't need any more. And so the hypothalamus stops or reduces the amount of this gonadotrophin releasing hormone. I hope you can keep up with this. It's complex, but it's very, very interesting. This series of loops that we have in our bodies, or chemical loops, and these testosterone levels then stay in range. And if it drops a little bit, then signals for more to be produced and then reduces it. This other one, inhibin B, is also a negative feedback loop, just as the testosterone one is. In fertile men, follicle stimulating hormone, that's as in the female, we produce it also, FSH, it's released from the pituitary to signal the testes to make inhibin B. And what this does, when it increases, it to decrease the follicle stimulating hormone. And this keeps inhibin B at a particular level. And so you don't want to, it's an inhibitory enzyme, hormone. And but this loop here, you have control it, keep under control. So what happens is, here's a diagram I found. So here we have the pituitary and the hypothalamus above it, and there's the link to the testes. So when testosterone levels get too low, the hypothalamus releases this hormone, gonadotropin. It goes to the pituitary, so from there to there, It's not very far. In the pituitary, it produces follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone to the testes, which produce testosterone and inhibin B. And so this then, the increased levels in the blood of testosterone goes back, and it gets too much, and then you get two stops. So this is the negative loop, and the same with the other way. Negative feedback. Oh, and that's the end of it. As I was going through it, it became more and more and more complicated, and I thought, I don't know how much more we should do with that. So I will stop the share, and I'll move to the next one. And so share screen. So this is the next, okay. So I thought I didn't know how long it'll take me to get through this, the last bit. So that took half an hour. And so I picked a short one, and as Peter said, it'll be useful. And it's very useful for everybody to know how their respiratory system actually works. So I thought I'd start off with a little bit of evolution. Now, I don't know if you've ever looked at an insect closely, a large one, like this locust or grasshopper. You might, next time you find one, pick it up, lift up its wings, and you'll find a whole lot of little holes here. They're called spiracles. And the and it's got that's how it breathes. It just pushes air in and out of that, and that moves. The heart is here. It's not a heart. There's about 7 of them or 8 of them along there, and just pushes it along. These are air sacs. So the body's hollow, and these little holes here are the spiracles. Okay, so it's fairly basic, and it's different. Then you've got an amphibian, say a frog, toad, salamander. These are sorts of lungs they have. They have holes in them, and again, very, very basic. From amphibians, we led to the reptiles. It's similar, but somewhat larger. The mammal is much more complex, much more complex, and that's where we're going to go today. So this is a structure. I found this diagram, and they've got the same naming system. So the bronchi, which leads air in and out of the alveolus in one. Now the birds have resolved an amazing problem, because they breathe. Every time they breathe, the air goes through the lungs in and out. So they get 2 goes of the air, and so they've got these air sacs here. You can see approximately there, and the 2 pink bits are the lungs. And when it breathes in, it goes through and into these air sacs where it comes, where it fills up with the air, and then it pushes it out and goes through the lungs again. So here's a diagram. They've got air sacs in the front and air sacs at the back, and they're the lungs. So when it comes here in, it goes both ways. And then when it goes out, it goes both ways again. It's an amazing system, and we would be able to do much more athletically if we had a system like this. And there's no wasted air here. And if you think about birds like hawks, for example, where some of them actually dive, but they're flying high, amazing eyesight, and they can see some prey down there, and they dive, and they're just kamikaze style, and the air pressure going in through the nostrils will be great. So if you didn't know they have these air sacs, you wonder how are they breathing, because you can't breathe out against this incredible air going in, but it works with their system. Now, I've got a small YouTube thing here, which I'd like to show you.
Dan Murphy did things his own way.
Thanks to Brilliant for supporting this episode of SciShow. Go to brilliant.org/SciShow to check out their
Can't see it.
physics of the
What's that?
We can't see the video. We can hear it, but we can't see it.
You can hear it, but can't see it.
That's right.
Well, what the problem is, hang on. I thought I covered all bases. What do you see now?
That's the one. We can see the bird lungs.
Oh.
You need to drop that one.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done this. You're right. Okay, I'll go back to share. Is it that one? All right, can you see this now?
everyday works.
Yes, we can see it now.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right, everybody, breathe in. Now let it out. Wow. That was inefficient. We mammals empty our lungs when we breathe out, and that's kind of a waste. During that time, the body doesn't have fresh air to pull oxygen from. Dinosaurs breathed very differently. We're pretty sure they had unidirectional airflow, so T-Rex and its dinosaur buddies probably had cooler lungs than you. And their feathered cousins alive today still breathe this way, an adaptation which helps them dominate the skies. Unidirectional airflow works a little something like this. When a bird breathes in, it doesn't fill up its lungs. It fills up air sacs around its lungs instead. This air then moves into its lungs when it breathes out, so all the old air is replaced by this fresh external stash. That means the lungs are never waiting for the next breath of oxygen-rich air. If we could get our lungs to breathe like this, we would probably upgrade our athletic performance considerably. After all, we would eliminate the oxygen-lacking exhalation step, and getting more oxygen is the whole point of doing physiological hacks like blood doping. And at first, that's why biologists thought birds evolved this neat trick, because the constant supply of oxygen gave them a wing up for flight. But there's a problem with this idea. Alligators, also crocodiles and certain iguanas, and monitor lizards. Turns out lots of animals breathe unidirectionally, and many of them do not fly. As biologists have figured out these species breathe this way, they've grown less confident about why it evolved in the first place, or even when. Since it's found in birds, crocodilians, and some lizards, it's possible that unidirectional flow evolved over 310 million years ago, and the common ancestor of all those groups, maybe as a way of of helping this early reptilian clear out its lungs. When we breathe, some old air tends to be left behind, and when we sit still or aren't breathing deeply, even more air tends to linger, which isn't awesome because it can take up valuable space, leading to less oxygen per breath. If early reptiles were pretty sedentary, like many are today, this lingering air issue could have been a problem for them, maybe even enough of one that they evolved a way to shove it all out. But unidirectional breathing has only been found in a couple of lizards, so it's possible lizards evolved it independently of birds and crocs, an example of convergent evolution. That could bump the origin of unidirectional breathing to when just those groups last shared an ancestor about 250 million years ago, and that's right around the Permian extinction, the largest mass extinction in Earth's history. It was bad enough that scientists often just call it the Great Dying. And it just so happens that at this time, the amount of oxygen in the air dropped dramatically. So some experts think unidirectional breathing helped keep this lineage of reptiles from suffocating, which could either explain how they made it through or why the trait evolved. Whether it was 250 or 310 million years ago, though, it's pretty clear that one-way breathing appeared long before birds took to the skies. Still, it helps them dominate the air now. Sure, there are flying mammals, namely bats, but on the whole, they can't fly as high or as far as birds. While breath for breath, birds and bats get about the same amount of oxygen, birds' super smooth breathing keeps getting them new air no matter what. That makes them much better at flying in low oxygen environments, like at really high altitudes where bats would suffocate. So even if unidirectional breathing didn't evolve for or because of flight, it sure helps birds excel at it. If all this talk of bird breathing has you craving to learn more about flight, I have some great news. Today's sponsor, Brilliant, can help. For instance, their Physics of the Everyday course can help you brush up on things like lift and how it allows planes to fly.
Okay. So, interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's move on. You can see the screen. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I can't see what you see. Okay, so the system itself, it functions. I just realized I made a mistake there. It's not the excretory system. I don't know how that got there. Okay, so there's an exchange of oxygen between air and blood. There's an exchange of carbon dioxide between blood and air. The components, we have the lungs, and within we've got these trachea, the bronchi, the cilia, the alveoli, the pleura. We can do that. We'll do that later. We have the ribs, the diaphragm, and of course the blood. And within that, the whole system works and keeps us alive. So some diagram here, the basic one. So at the top here, the larynx leads to the trachea. And then from there you get to the bronchi, the bronchioles, the smaller ones. There's a whole complex here with the nose and the mouth. By the way, you know that it's all one opening, the mouth and the nose. But we developed the hard palate and the soft palate, which separates it. And then you've got the tongue and so on. So we've got the bronchioles and the alveoli. That's where the exchange happens. And of course, you've got the lungs. Now, this diagram here shows it. The numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the right, and 1 and 2 on the left. Now the left lung has one lobe less because the heart takes a certain amount of space on the left. So the right lung is got more space for exchange. It's bigger. So here's another diagram here. You can see a fairly large amount of space behind the nose. It comes down here. Here's the mouth, the tongue, and we have the pharynx is the back of the throat, the larynx is the voice box, and then we have these cartilages here. Now the cartilages are there for a very, very strong purpose, because in order to breathe in, the diaphragm, which is a dome-shaped thing, the muscle, so the muscles come together and they drop, they pull down, if you like. They're actually hinged further down, they're attached rather. So by doing that, they drop the air pressure in the lungs or in the actual chest cavity. By dropping the air pressure, air has to be sucked in, if you like. Now, there's no such thing as suction. So when you drink, pick up a glass or bottle with a straw coming out, and we suck on the straw, what we're doing, we're reducing the air pressure in the straw. So the air pressure surrounding the liquid that's in the glass or the bottle is greater than that in the straw, and the air pressure pushes down on the liquid and then comes up the straw into our mouth. So when the air pressure in here is dropped, air is actually not sucked in, if you like. So breathing in is a suction of air. It's like a vacuum cleaner. It sucks air in, and then the rest of it is there. But if you, let's go back to the straw. If you take a straw, and it's a flexible straw, plastic or paper, and you put it in your mouth and hold the base of it, so you block it and you suck it, then it'll just collapse, because the air outside has a greater pressure than the air inside. And the purpose of these cartilage rings, which goes all the way up, is to stop the trachea and the bronchi collapsing every time you breathe in. Well, you wouldn't breathe in because you'd be dead if the cartilages didn't form. So I thought that might be a very interesting point to think about, the movement of air in the chest, which we don't even think about, but it's there. So here these cartilages, bits of cartilage, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So we've got the trachea, they become the bronchus, so you get bronchitis when you get inflammation of the bronchi, and you get what's secondary and tertiary, and then you get the bronchioles, and they're the ones that the alveoli, the little sacs, are attached to. Yeah. The larynx is up here, and that's where the voice box is. This is where you're speaking from, where I'm speaking from. Now, it's important to also realize the complexity of the relationship between the lungs and the heart. So, I'm looking for a number one. Oh, there it is. Okay. So it's a good place to start here. The right ventricle, remember we talked about the circulatory system, and we always have blood with less oxygen in it and showing as blue, and with more oxygen, oxygenated blood as red. So on the right side of the heart, where the blood's come in from all over the body, is called deoxygenated. There's less oxygen. The heart squeezes, it pushes it up here into the lungs, into the right and left. Now, I also should mention, then we're looking at a drawing, a diagram, a photo of of anything anatomical. You would call it, as you would if you would be looking at it, from a human. So if you looked at mine on the right side and the left side, so this is the right side, and that's the left side. Okay, so the lungs then oxygenate the blood comes into the left atrium, into the left ventricle. Notice the difference in size of the heart wall down here. It's massive. Here it's much thinner because all it has to do is push the blood into the lungs. This one, the left ventricle, is massive amount of muscle because it's got to push the blood right around the body. Now, okay, so it goes up to the brain and then around the body. And it requires a lot of effort. Okay, we'll come back to that. So the bronchi, they're the ones deep down here. They're lined with cells and this also I should have included the trachea, and these little cells are called cilia, and these cilia move. Between them is also there are also very special cells here which produce mucus. So all these tubes here are covered in a thin layer of mucus, and anything that you breathe in, like dust, some particulate matter, would get stuck into it, and the body has to get rid of it. Now, what happens is it moves, it gets stuck in, and these cilia, these fine little hairs, all move in the same direction. They beat up, and everything moves up into, and then into up to the where the trachea and the esophagus meet, and push everything into the esophagus. So your lungs are constantly being cleaned by this mucus material. Sorry, the mucus with the particulate matter in it, up and then into the stomach, gets rid of everything. It could be bacteria, it could be smoke. If you're a cigarette smoker, definitely. You're walking through something dusty. You pick up a lot of rubbish, but it's caught. You can't have it in your lung. Okay, so these cilia are important. So this is what they look like, and they all beat in the same direction. So they're swaying backwards and forwards, but they beat continuously up, further and further up. So it moves from the esophagus into the esophagus, and as I said, into the stomach. And so here's another little. Come on. Okay, so I'll get out of.
My job is to make college easier because students have a lot on that.
Okay, hang on. Where are we? We're here. Can you see that? Oh, wait a minute. Okay.
The air we breathe contains foreign matter such as dust, bacteria, and pollen. Hair-like cells called cilia, as well as goblet cells, can be found in the lining of the respiratory tract called the respiratory epithelium. Goblet cells secrete viscous mucus that forms a layer to trap foreign material. The wave-like action of the underlying cilia mobilizes the mucus layer, removing the foreign matter and preventing it from entering the lungs.
So where am I? Okay, so let's go back now. So that just gave you an idea of what the cilia do. And I'm up to here. Where are we?
That's it.
Yeah, Peter. Okay. So the problem here is also people who smoke for a long time, the cilia get destroyed, and so it doesn't clean the lungs, and you get this smoker's cough. Now the mucus keeps being produced and accumulates in the lungs, so it's got to be removed. And of course, the smoke itself can lead to lung cancer. Now, for breathing to occur, this is what I said before, the chest cavity has to increase in volume, and but the idea is to decrease the air pressure. Now, this is done in two ways. I mentioned the diaphragm before, moving down, but I didn't mention the ribs. That's the other part. Now, the ribs are hinged on the big backbone, and they actually act as a gate. So when you breathe in, they move up, and then when you breathe out, they move down. So to breathe out, the diaphragm moves up, and the chest moves down, and you get this hinging effect. So by increasing and decreasing the air pressure, the air moves in and out of the mouth, of the lungs. So it's a good system, but the bird one is much more efficient. So the alveoli, and the singular of alveoli is alveolus, they're really tiny. They're only 1 cell thick. They have a very, very high surface area to volume ratio. So it's very, and because the walls are so thin, the air moves, the gases move through very, very quickly and into the blood very, very quickly. So they're lined up like this, like bunches of grapes. It's exactly what they look like. And again, so when you look at you've got the cartilage, you've got the trachea, the bronchus, the bronchiole, and so on. And then, of course, the blood vessels, because you've got to get the carbon dioxide, which is what the cells in the body produce, which is not good, particularly good for us. The carbon dioxide is removed, and the oxygen replaces it in the blood. So this is a nice diagram. So you've got the bronchia, the trachea, the bronchioles, the cartilage rings. So these look like this network are the, and you notice that the red and blue. So the red is oxygenated, the blue is deoxygenated, and deoxygenated means bodies use the oxygen out of it, and they're just little round things like that, little bubbles. The amount of the percentage at sea level of oxygen in the air is normally 21%, around 21%. And in the blood, the oxygenated blood is 17. The carbon dioxide in the air is 0.04, and in the air, in the blood, it's 4.04. So the difference between 21 and 17, 21 is air coming, oxygen coming in, and as the blood gets to the lungs, 4% of that's been used, and that 4% is here, which has been converted in the metabolic processes to carbon dioxide, and then it's removed. We breathe in the next bit. When we breathe in, it's 0.04. We breathe out, it's 4.04. So these sea level numbers, but as you go up mountains, the numbers change, and as you move higher and higher, the percentage of oxygen, say in Everest, you can't climb Everest without carrying oxygen with you. Just not enough there. I don't think anyone here is planning Everest in the next week or two, so I won't worry about it. Now, the alveoli, so these words, again, so the blood comes through into the lungs, from the brain, from the body, and it's deoxygenated. The oxygen has been removed from, or has moved from the blood to the cells. So it's low in oxygen, but because the cells produce the carbon dioxide, it moves into the blood. So there's an exchange there. And this exchange of gases at the alveoli in the lungs is, we want the blood to become oxygenated. So the carbon dioxide is removed and the oxygen it moves in. And the exhaled air is lower in oxygen and higher in carbon dioxide. So that's what I was saying before about the 4% difference. So there's 4% more, 4% of oxygen is used up and 4% carbon dioxide leaves. So here's a diagram showing this. So we breathe in air, in the breathed in oxygen moves across the cell membrane into the blood vessel, the capillary, and carbon dioxide moves out of the blood into the airspace. So as the blood moves around, it becomes more and more oxygenated and then moves out. Now these two words here, venual and arterial, refers, it's not quite right, but the words are there. A venule is a small vein and arterial is a small artery. But around the, something like these cells here, that probably be close to capillaries rather than these, but I thought I'd mention them. Now, it says here, alveolar wall coated with a surfactant, and a surfactant is something that reduces surface tension in liquids, and that helps move the gases. How is it possible for gases to be exchanged so rapidly? I mean, if you think about it, if you're exercising and you start breathing faster and deeper, you still get a very, very rapid, very fast change in gas. We have a process called simple diffusion. And the simple diffusion is a movement of small molecules in a medium like gas or a liquid. So it's due to a difference in the number of molecules in one area of the gas or the liquid compared to another area. So I'll show you a little diagram in a sec. So this difference in number is said to be the concentration difference, or what biologists use a concentration gradient from low to high. So these concentration gradients, it causes no energy is required, just causes the molecules to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration of these same molecules. So here's a diagram. if you just have plain water and you put in some sugar and say a lump of sugar, because it all ends up down the bottom, just leave it without stirring it, the concentration of sugar in this corner here is much higher than anywhere else in the jar. Or this is a beaker. And over time, the molecules will just move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration until you get an even distribution right through the whole water. Now, the molecules are still moving constantly, but the concentration in any part of that liquid is the same. And this is called diffusion or simple diffusion. And so there's a graph here which shows as if imagine here at 100% concentration of the sugar with the cube of sugar, the 100% here. As distance increases away from that cube, the concentration reduces. It's a linear concentration. And so if you leave it long enough, that eventually will become 100% right through. I mean, it'll be the same all the way through. Now, it gets a little more complicated than sugar in water. So in the air, as we said, concentration is 21%, and blood in the lungs coming into the lungs is at 17. So we have a concentration gradient. So here we have the cells of the lung, and here we have the blood in the vessel. Red blood cells carry it. Now, red blood cells carry the oxygen, a little bit of carbon dioxide. Most of the carbon dioxide is actually carried in the liquid, in the serum. And because, so this shows, so the relationship is a cell produces carbon dioxide and uses oxygen. Now, the oxygen is in the air, so that inside the lung is still the external environment. It's not us. Anything within the inside the alveoli is external. The oxygen moves across the cells of the alveoli directly into the capillary there, where the oxygen is, and then from the oxygen, from the capillary, it moves into normal body cells. So the red blood cells are there. And then it uses the oxygen to produce its energy. And the carbon dioxide is produced, and it goes into the blood and then out into the air in the alveoli. Right, so this is all, no energy is required. It's all purely diffusion, simple diffusion. And carbon dioxide is the same. It's all these same numbers that I keep saying. And from about year 9, I think every kid would know these numbers if the teachers know them, because they are really useful ideas of how it's possible to get a gas exchange so quickly, happens incredibly quickly, and no energy is required. So again, what I said before, the alveoli is an exchange, and then we get to the blood and through the out of the heart, left side of the heart, to the body and the brain, and then within the body you get the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and then back, and the whole thing just keeps moving. And every cell needs oxygen, but not the red blood cells because they're surrounded by it. And the red blood cells actually don't metabolize. They don't do anything. They don't even have a nucleus. They're the only cells in the body that don't have a nucleus. And so these cells, we need oxygen, and except carbon dioxide is a waste product. However, carbon dioxide is very important to our capacity to breathe. When carbon dioxide is mixed with water, you get soda water. Now, soda water is a weak acid called carbonic acid. So it's carbon dioxide and water together. That's it there, right? Now, carbonic acid forms when the blood is high in carbon dioxide. So we have an acidic blood, if you like, when there's more carbon dioxide than there should be. So this acidity in the blood, so the pH drops, and it stimulates breathing. And this is how we stimulate. And the reason you start breathing faster when you're exercising, you're producing more carbon dioxide, there's more, the greater acidity gets to the brain and stimulates breathing. And so the idea is to remove this excess carbon dioxide, and by removing it through the lungs, of course, we breathe deeper, so we get more oxygen as well. Okay, so this carbonic acid, the capacity of carbon dioxide dissolving in water and then being expelled through the lungs is very, very important. Otherwise, we would never breathe. Now, we have a thing called cellular respiration, now, or metabolism, if you like. And carbon dioxide is produced by all cells except red blood cells. And we have cellular respiration to produce ATP in the mitochondria. Now, you've all heard of mitochondria, I'm sure. And if you into genealogy, you also know about mitochondrial DNA. That's another story. So ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate, and I'll go into detail in another talk on this. It's all cells, I said virtually all, but it's not the red blood cells. And we can't do it. And the mitochondria, they process glucose and they produce the ATP. There's a whole, when you I majored in biochemistry and physiology. When you do biochemistry in second year, one of the first things they teach you is this process here. It's quite complex and you're expected to know it by heart, and it takes a while, but it's very, very interesting what happens. Now, so the more active part of the body is, could be the legs, could be the arms, whatever you're doing, you're producing more carbon dioxide, you've got to get rid of it and increase your breathing rate. So, again, these numbers keep coming up. I'm sorry, but that's the way the system works. And with carbon dioxide, as with oxygen, you get this diffusion right through. So I mentioned oxygenated blood. That's blood with just fresh out of the lungs. It's got 21% oxygen, and by the time it gets back to the lungs, it's 17. But when the blood gets to the lungs from the right side, it's got 4% carbon dioxide and has got rid of it. This is another diagram just to reinforce this. So here's the carbonic acid. because carbonic acid in water actually is an ion for a negative charge. So you get this ion, and it takes a hydrogen from water, and it forms, well, carbonic acid here, but really what it does, it breaks it down to this. So this forms that. It's all part of this. Okay, so it's a very, very simple reaction. And I've mentioned that before. So due to the concentration gradient, okay, again, oxygen from the lungs, the concentration gradient, high oxygen, low oxygen moves in, high carbon dioxide, low carbon dioxide. Oh, sorry, this is a different one. So this is high oxygen. When it gets to the tissues which have used their oxygen, then they're lower in oxygen, so the oxygen it leaves through diffusion into the actual tissues around the body. Now, to get there, we have these red blood cells, and the red blood cells, this would be one red blood cell, it has hemoglobin molecules. And you'll notice that this is an American diagram. The A in hemoglobin is missing. So hemoglobin is a very important part of the whole process. Now, the word heme, H-A-E-M, means blood. Globin means protein, so blood protein. And each hemoglobin molecule is made up of 4 heme groups, blood groups. And it has an ion, an ion which has a charge on it. And a charged atom is called an ion, so it's an ion. And in the center. So oxygen has a very, very strong affinity to hemoglobin, and it attaches to hemoglobin and forms this complex. And this complex we call oxyhemoglobin is hemoglobin with 2 oxygens. And so when this happens, we get oxygenated blood. So so the oxygen attaches very readily to the hemoglobin, but also detaches very easily when it gets to an area of low oxygen in the body. So oxygen is then transported. So we have, here's a hemoglobin, and then the oxygen moves around. This is the blood. Now, this word here, interstitial fluid, is fluid between cells. So here's the tissue cell, and this is a capillary cell. These are cells of capillaries. So you get this carbon dioxide moving from there to there. Okay. This is a diagram of a hemoglobin molecule. It's made up of 4 heme groups. Each group has got an ion in it. It's not an atom, it's an ion. And an ion. And there are 3 possible heme chains of hemoglobin. And they're called alpha, beta, and gamma. Us adults, we use 2 of them, the alpha chains and the beta chains. So there's 2 of each, 2 alphas and 2 betas in each hemoglobin molecule. However, embryos don't make beta chains, they make gamma chains. And it gives a different property to the blood of the embryo and then the fetus. And then getting close to birth, I don't know how many days or weeks beforehand, but the embryos, or rather the fetus's system, stops making gamma chains and starts making beta chains. So the blood then gets slowly rolled over to adult blood, as we call it, the alpha beta system. Now, I don't know if you know, but a red blood cell with all the heme groups in it only is around for 120 days. So it'll be some time before birth that this happens, to go from embryonic blood to adult blood. So that by the time it's born, you've got mostly adult blood, the alpha beta chains. To show you what a heme group looks like, it's got these 4 little sections here with a nitrogen, and they attract the iron in the middle. Just for anyone who's done chemistry sometime along the way. So we have 2 alpha chains, 2 beta chains. Each of the 4 contain an iron atom. I suppose it might be easier to say than iron. It attracts the oxygen. Now, each hemoglobin molecule, each red blood cell has about 270 million hemoglobin molecules in them. So they're not big. I just realized that there's something I didn't mention, didn't include, is the shape of the red blood cell. Now, the shape of the red blood cell is a biconcave. So it's actually, it looks sort of like that. It comes in and increases its surface area. And one of the, it's good for the exchange, but another thing I should mention, that the capillaries, some of them are so small, so narrow, that the red blood cells have to fold over to fit through. So, and that is why they don't have a nucleus. The red blood cells don't have a nucleus, and they don't metabolize. They don't exist for long, about 120 days. When carbon dioxide is breathed in, they also, this is carbon monoxide, not dioxide. Because carbon monoxide is very similar to oxygen, it attaches itself to a heme molecule, and we get a thing called this HbCO, carboxyhemoglobin, not oxyhemoglobin, but carboxy. And it, like oxygen, as oxygen is easily released, carbon monoxide is not released. It just sticks there and takes up all the good spaces that the oxygen needs. So since the oxygen can't attach, and if a person keeps on breathing carbon monoxide, they'll eventually go into a deep sleep and die, because there's just not enough oxygen to keep them going. If someone finds someone inside a car with an exhaust pipe, hose coming from the exhaust pipe, leaving, and they take them out and they give them oxygen, and for long enough, they'll keep them going if they're not too far gone. And don't forget, fresh hemoglobin will be made every day, huge numbers, and they could survive, but it depends on when they're found. So these 2 diagrams, that's a diagram of oxygen molecule. I won't go through the chemistry, but they are very, very similar. And because of that, they actually fit in very nicely into the heme group. I just put that you might wonder why they are like why the carbon monoxide fits in with the oxygen. That's why, because they're very almost identical in shape and size. Now, some figures. The two lungs, this is the average person, whatever an average person is. We have about 2,500 kilometers of airways in our lungs. We have between 300 and 500 million alveoli, a surface area about 70 square meters. It's about half a tennis court in the lungs. That's what makes it so efficient. Now, if all the capillaries surrounding the alveoli were unwound and laid end to end, they extend about 1,000 kilometers. They're very small, they're very fine, but they're there, and there's a lot of them. Now, the pleura, I should mention, are two membranes, and they surround the lungs. And there are the inside one is called the visceral pleura, and the outside one is called the parietal pleura. I guess that. And between the pleura, this membrane makes a fluid called pleural fluid, and it acts as a lubricant. Now, what happens is, if you think about our lungs being opening and closing, sort of enlarging and reducing, and everything moving inside, you've got to have something around it to control the whole mechanism and to hold it in. But because they're moving backwards and forwards, they've got this very, very slippery surface, I guess, which they rub against each other, but they're well lubricated. And if you have pleurisy, then you would know that they're there. And so if sometimes you get a puncture, but through an accident, in the side of the chest, and you would be puncturing these two membranes, and once air gets in, and the system keeps breathing, getting the diaphragm going down, the breath going up, and the air pressure drops inside, you get air coming in through the side, wherever the hole is. It's called a pneumothorax, air in the chest coming in. And if you ever find someone doing that, you've got to block that hole. There may not be much blood, but the air will be moving in and out, and they will not be getting oxygen through the mouth or the nose. So even a piece of plastic, any sort of plastic covering that hole, or firm, or you can hold it there, will allow them to keep breathing. Now, I think this is the last screen. Oh no, this link, I want you to about 8 minutes. It's really a summary of everything I've just covered. It's worth having a look at. It's a little bit kinky, a bit different, but it's interesting. And just to finish off, we have the diseases of the lungs, asthma, which is a constriction of the bronchi, is the cells of the bronchi become swollen. So the airspace between them gets less and less and less and less. And it's very hard. And as an asthmatic, I can tell you, you can breathe in, It's very hard to breathe it out. There's asbestosis. You've probably heard a fair bit of it. People working with various stones, very, very fine crystals get into the lung. They scar the lung tissue and it doesn't heal, and causes all sorts of problems. Bronchitis. So it's itis is the inflammation of the bronchi, and antibiotics fixes that up. COPD, you may have heard of, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. We go again, trouble breathing. Emphysema, it's due to asbestos, and the asbestosis is similar to that, but emphysema is could be caused by other things as well, like cigarette smoke. In the flu, lung cancer, mesothelioma, tumors of the alveoli, pertussis, whooping cough, pleurisy. Now pleurisy is where the two pleura get infected, and they get swollen, and they don't produce the lubricant, and apparently it's quite a painful situation. Pneumonia, bacterial lung disease, and TB, or it used to be called consumption. And by the way, TB is making a comeback, and there's a lot of TB in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea. And I don't know if you read in the paper a day or two ago, that Australia is sending over about 100 soldiers, but from the medical area, to help with inoculations against tuberculosis. We don't have any in Australia, thankfully. So I will leave you to have a look at that one, and I will stop that. So guys, it's like hi Judy, I didn't see you before. Hi, and Pauline also. I've had a few apologies for today, and I'm glad that you guys are here. So the end of the last one, the endocrinology, and this one are fairly complex. And you've got the notes. If you haven't got the notes, I'll give them to you. Just ask for them. If you have any questions, you can always email me. I will stop the recording in a second.
Question: when can I get a bird lung transplant?
A what?
A bird lung transplant.
Funny you should say that. A friend of mine just had one.
Oh, a lung transplant?
A lung transplant.
Oh, I want one from a bird. They sound they've got a better job.
No, he plays in the band with me, and even before the lung transplant, he had oxygen, and he was playing second cornet, so it wasn't a heavy duty section part, but he loved to play. So, and he's had the lung transplant, and he's back blowing away as much as he can. Yeah, they do lung transplants. But it's taken him back at least 4 months to recover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Judy, unmute yourself. Press this, unmute. Press the space bar. Yeah.
Space bar. Okay.
Yeah.
The notes that I wanted was because I was away in April. I was in Israel, so I just thought if there were any lectures there that I missed, I wouldn't mind getting them.
I've sent them to you last week.
No, you only sent me the one from last week.
I sent you all of this year's, then there's so many, I sent you 2 emails. And they're attached to the emails, the
I
notes.
will have another look. I think I need an expert to help me.
You've got them all, and all the videos are all on the YouTube as well.
Which
So-
is great. Okay, thank you very much.
That's okay, Judy. Have a look at those emails.
I will do.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? On that note, I bid you all farewell, and I will see you in a fortnight.
Okay,
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
very interesting. Bye.
Very, very good.
See you then.
Bye. All the best.
Bye.